Jessii Vee, and as you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking about the disturbing true story and inspiration for the book Frankenstein. And when I say disturbing, I actually do really mean it. This video is very hard to do research for, so I just want to give a disclaimer before we get right into it that yes, this is going to be a lot. Before I get started though, because we are reaching the end of May and May has been Lyme Disease Awareness Month, I just want to remind you guys one more time to be very careful while you're out in nature this summer, or really any time where the weather is especially warmer. Ticks are in the grass, they're in the bushes, they're in the trees, and they latch onto you so quickly. So whenever I know I'm going hiking or I'm going to be out amongst the grass and the leaves and the bushes, I always make sure to wear long pants, socks pulled over my pants, sneakers, long sleeve shirts. It's actually really good to wear white or lighter colors so you can see if any ticks are on you. And whenever you get back from your hike or being out camping, it's good to remove your clothes right away, throw them in the laundry machine, and go take a shower and tick check yourself or get someone else to help tick check you. There's this myth that a tick has to be on you for 2 or 3 days before it can pass on the disease. But use me as an example that is not true, because I was bitten on my shoulder. It was literally on me for maybe 10 seconds. I was able to get it off, and the next few days I got the bullseye rash and I was diagnosed with Lyme disease a year later. This disease changes your whole entire life, so if you've been bitten or you think you've been bitten, definitely see a doctor right away. And I always want to spread the word about Lyme disease because it's not talked about enough. And just to also remind you that $1 from every single purchase that you make on our website goes directly towards the G. Magnata Foundation, which is a foundation that is trying to change the way that Lyme disease is tested, treated, and diagnosed in Canada. So yeah, if you were thinking of getting any of our new plushies, we have a lot that just went up. We have some new light up unicorns and light up dragons, so $1 from each purchase goes towards something really, really good. All right guys, without further ado, let's get right into today's video talking about the disturbing history, inspiration, true story of Frankenstein. Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley in 1818, and the book tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, who is a Swiss student of natural science who creates an artificial man from pieces of corpses and brings his creature to life. Though it initially seeks affection, the monster inspires loathing in everyone who meets it. Lonely and miserable, the monster turns upon its creator, who eventually loses his life. And since the book was released, there have been so many different adaptations, and Frankenstein has become a classic monster. I feel like everyone knows who he is, even if you've never read the book or you've never seen any of the movies. You know who Frankenstein is. But you must wonder, where the heck did the writer get her inspiration from? And the true story is even darker than you may imagine. So let's get into some of those inspiration. The first one is about frog legs. Decades before Mary Shelley wrote her book, there was a scientist named Luigi Galvani who discovered that the muscles of dead frogs' legs twitched and convulsed spontaneously when struck by an electrical spark. And this was just the start of scientists trying to bring dead things to life with the power of electricity, and this was highly believed to be one of the main inspirations for Frankenstein. Then we have the human experiments, and yes, this is where it just disturbs me the most, so proceed with caution. On January 18th of 1803, when Mary Shelley was only 5 years old, a man named George Forster was hanged by the neck in London. The court found him guilty of drowning his wife and children in a canal, which is awful. And after he died, his body was delivered to the workshop of a scientist named Giovanni Aldini, who moved to the area to specifically be right near where the hangings took place, so that afterwards he could experiment on their bodies. So of course, once he heard about this murderer, George Forster, he summoned this audience of medical students and curious onlookers and began to work on the corpse. First, he moved the limbs and struck his face multiple times to demonstrate that Forster was really dead, and probably to also make sure himself. Then he soaped the dead man's ears with salt water and stuck sponges in them to conduct electricity. And finally, he applied electrodes to each ear and passed an electrical current through the dead man's body. Suddenly, the dead man began to quiver and convulse, and his jaws began to open and close. Apparently, one of his eyes even opened, his right arm moved up in the air, and his thighs began to rapidly move. And to anybody watching, it must have seemed like Giovanni was raising a murderer from the dead. And this was a very disturbing disturbing idea for many people. Questions were even asked in government circles about what the law would require if Forrester actually came back to life, and the consensus was that he would have to be hanged a second time. After this disturbing experiment, scientists began to gather more and more freshly dead criminals to play around with, and there was no shortage of executions in Britain, since around 300 crimes carried the death penalty, so people were just dying left, right, and center. One of the scientists named Andrew Ure loved having a huge crowd watch him do this, and he could literally make bodies throw their arms around, their legs around. One time, a flailing leg even knocked over one of his assistants. Like, imagine being thrown into a wall by a dead body. He was even able to make dead bodies look like they were still breathing, and he could even make these deceased criminals have these ghastly smiles appear on their faces, or even look like they were enraged. People would be so terrified watching all of these experiments happen that they would often faint or even go throw up. Eventually, local churches shut him down by force because they said he was summoning devils in his lab. People thought that these criminals were literally being brought back from hell. So yes, this was literally the biggest inspiration for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I always thought that this was mainly a fictional monster, that it didn't come from anything historical, but it definitely did. And lastly, we have brain removal. A natural philosopher, Carl August Wainhold, conducted a gruesome brain-removing experiment on a kitten in 1817, and this was only a year before Mary Shelley published her book Frankenstein. Wainhold was said to replace the kitten's brain with zinc and silver, which essentially created a battery. And the experiment was said to explore an idea at the time that electricity was key to an animal's life, and that the dead could be reanimated with it. So when he conducted this brain removal experiment on the kitten and replaced his head with battery, he said his kitten opened its eyes, looked straight ahead with a glazed expression, hobbled about, and then fell down exhausted. This is absolutely horrible, right? And in the novel, scientist Victor Frankenstein creates the monster we all know from old body parts, strange chemicals, and a spark that gives him life. And one last thing that I forgot to mention about Mary Shelley is that 2 years before she was born, her mother jumped off a bridge because she was suffering from depression, and she drowned and was then revived and brought back to life. And back then they didn't really understand CPR, so this being brought back to life was really crazy to her, and was also another inspiration for her book. So yeah, like I said, this video was definitely disturbing, and a lot of stuff I didn't know until I did research literally this past weekend. So comment down below if you want me to do more videos like this on the real stories or inspirations on classic monsters like Dracula or whoever else you want me to do. Comment down below which classic monster you would like me to do next. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!